Hello and welcome to Analog Insights. In today's episode, I'm taking a closer look at the Minolta 28mm f2.8 MD lens. This is an inexpensive but well-performing wide-angle lens for the Minolta MC MD mount that was built between 1977 and 1984. I have one of the last versions here, which is also known as MD3 among collectors, or new MD. And this particular one is a 5 elements and 5 groups design. And there are different versions out there that we will discuss a bit more in a minute. This particular lens costs between 50 to 100 euros, so really inexpensive, especially for what you get for the money, because the reason is not that it is a bad lens. On the contrary, this is really a great, fantastic performer. It is well built, it feels really nice in your hands, and produces great results. And the main reason is that this is not a rare collector piece, but instead was produced in large quantities, so it is widely available, and it is easy when you're in the market to find one in great condition for around 90 to 100 euros. And if condition is not so important to you, you can also find one for significantly less. As long-term viewers of this channel, you might be a little bit surprised to see me doing another 28mm focal length review, because traditionally I'm more of a 50mm shooter. I prefer doing portraits or street shots or similar things, but the 28mm focal length kind of grew on me over time, and I realized that it nicely complements a 50mm, and I just wanted to have something in my lens collection for my Minolta MD mount or MC mount lenses that kind of fits to that need. And wanted something that is a little bit wider than a 35mm without being too wide, and that again, when carrying the 50mm, kind of complements it. It is different enough and really interesting then for capturing architecture, landscapes, and similar things. So I took this particular lens with me on a recent trip to Tokyo, shooting it with my father's Minolta XD7, so what Bellamy Hunt would call the dad camera, the typical one. And I kind of took it there because for sentimental reasons, I felt like the camera is coming home if I'm taking it to Tokyo, where it was originally, to Japan at least, where it was originally created and produced. And it basically traveled all the way to Germany, where it was sold to my dad, and then it traveled all the way with me back to Tokyo to take some street shots and pictures for architecture, landscapes, and so on. And then I also took the lens with me, shooting it on the Minolta SRT 101 to Austria to get some mountainous landscape shots, and in and around Munich for some regular street shots. So without further ado, let's take a closer look at this particular lens, its optical design, its performance, and how it handles. Let's dive in there. There are multiple versions of the Minolta 28mm f2.8 lens. There was originally an MCW Rockor, then the MDW Rockor, and then later on only MD. And of course, these names here are referring to the designations that you typically see around the lens. So The newer they are, the cleaner this designation gets, and in general you can also say that there were some refinements when it comes to the waffle grips and other elements. You can also say or have to point out that the newer the lens, the more likely it is that Minolta simplified the construction a little bit, made it of course more refined, but also used a bit more plastic in order to scale the production and meet the demand. So if you really want a heavier, high quality lens, then I would always refer to the bit older ones, maybe an earlier MD, W, or even an MC. Or if it's important to you to have a really, as clean and new as possible lens, then look for these 1980s lenses that only have the MD designation. And of course, there are these charts out there that make it tremendously easier to get your head around the entire Minolta lens lineup. You just look at the charts, see at a glance how many versions were produced, then you can take a look at the weight, the optical formulas, and so on, and typically quickly find which versions you would be drawn to, and then you can deep dive when it comes to your with your research. And just as you thought, oh, that's not so complicated, this particular 28mm lens came with different optical designs. All of them basically come with 7 elements and 7 groups, and except for the very last one, which I have here, which comes with a 5 elements and 5 groups design. And to make things worse, the last 2 versions are already designated MD3, so the one but they come with different optical formulas. So the one released in 1981 is already an MD3, but comes with the 7 elements and 7 groups design, and my version here, released in 1983, is a 5 elements and 5 groups design, and the only visual differences are this little ring here at the front, the inner ring basically, that only has my version, and then if you look at this red dot here on the depth of focus scale, it is slightly closer to the 8 in my version and closer to the 4 in the earlier versions. And now you might wonder, how can you possibly know this? Of course, there were other reviews out there mentioning that, but also there is fantastic documentation of Minolta lenses on the web, one of the best documented manufacturers in my opinion, and you can basically find pages like this one where you can scroll through an entire list of images featuring exactly the designation of the lens, all the details about the lens, and then an image next to it, and you can easily compare which version is which one, and then go on eBay and find exactly what you were looking for. And this is exactly what I did. I read through multiple reviews, looked at comparative reviews and so on, and eventually I settled for this particular one here because I wanted something that is as compact, as small and refined as possible. And I also liked it from a visual perspective, this particular one, and it felt like the right choice if I just want to have some 28mm in my lineup and complement my lens collection. I also got a fitting lens hood, which in my opinion looks really nice, and a original Minolta sky filter. So what about the optical performance and results? Overall, it is a really nice performer. Despite being a 28mm lens that is relatively wide, of course, and only coming with a maximum aperture of f2.8, you can easily create a really nice creamy bokeh when having a subject in the foreground and focusing on that at closer distances. I haven't shot any portraits with this particular lens, but tried to have some subjects where I had this clear foreground-background separation, and repeatedly I get really nice results. And even with a bit more distance, you can see the effect that you can create and how much it draws you in. The lens has good contrast and is generally relatively resistant to flaring, even when shot directly into the sun, or when having strong reflections when shooting architecture and so on, and generally handled these situations well. It is not a particularly sharp lens, especially not when shot wide open. Sharpness significantly improves, especially in the center and then also in the corners once you stop down. I would say the best performance is around f8, so ideal for landscapes. If you're really shooting landscapes with this lens, I would always go for an f8 or even a bit more aperture. The lens does certainly come with a more pronounced vignetting, especially at f2.8 and f4, and you can see that a lot in my street shots from Japan, where at least to my eyes, this kind of adds to the images because it creates a more intimate atmosphere, and kind of the vignettes help draw you into the picture and focus on the center of attention. So I didn't mind the vignetting here. In contrast to that, when shooting landscapes, I think it can be a bit more of a nuisance. In Austria, for instance, kind of the perfect landscape use case, I sometimes had to shoot wide open. In early morning, there was not a lot of light available. I didn't have a tripod at the time with me, so I was kind of dependent on what the film speed and a reasonable shutter speed would allow me, and that also resulted in having wide open apertures. And here you can see it a bit more with the vignetting, but overall it's still fine. There are some in-depth comparisons out there, which is, in my opinion, unusual between the different lens versions and the different optical designs. So the 5 elements and 5 groups design versus the 7 elements and 7 groups design. And I think these are fantastic resources, and just a shout out, they tremendously helped me in researching this for this particular video. And I really appreciated having this resource when researching and making my own buying decision. To be honest, I'm more of a real live results person and not so much what does the chart say and how does it look if you really pixel peeping and so on. And yet it was helpful, and I settled on this particular lens depending on the test that you look at. Sometimes the 7 elements and 7 groups design comes out first as well. So it really comes down to your use cases, and I would just encourage you to take a deeper look if you're curious. Overall, I was really satisfied with the results. The only thing is when shot wide open, it's not particularly sharp, neither in the center nor in the corners, and we do see some strong vignetting, but both effects can be dealt with once you stop down a little bit. It's a perfectly fine lens and a really solid performer. So what about the handling and my personal impressions? Overall, I'm very fond of Minolta lenses. I like the quality feel. They give me a feeling of reliability. They are well produced. And I always get the feeling that they have just the right heft, if you know what I mean. They're neither too heavy nor too light. And in this particular case, you just get a lot of lens in that relatively compact package and the 185 grams. So if you take a closer look, you have this beautiful, clean design that the later MD2 and MD3 lenses are famous for. And personally, I'm also drawn to exactly these lenses. I also like the beautiful inscriptions and the colors that were used, these contrasty ones that really make all the inscriptions nicely and clearly visible. The waffle grip is really smooth and makes it easy and a joy to focus. And of course, the aperture clicks nicely into place. So overall, you get a lot of lens for 50 to 100 euros. And at least for my money, this is what, in my opinion, every Minolta shooter should have this lens in their collection. It is just hands down a fantastic lens, and also within the 28mm range, with the f3.5 or also an f2 as an alternative. This, from my perspective, is the perfect sweet spot and what you should be aiming for. And in my case, it just made me very, very happy, and I love shooting with it, and I love the results that I get with it. And it's also proof that wonderful things don't have to be rare or expensive. We can also just sometimes be lucky, and yeah, they were produced in large quantities in the past, and now they're easily available. And if you take that second and third look and get informed, do some research, you can also find very nice condition lenses for a little money that are still relatively recent and coming from the mid-1980s or early 1980s and look fantastic. So highly recommended lens that I really, really enjoy shooting. So, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Analog Insights and my review of the Minolta 28mm f2.8, a must-have for every Minolta shooter that delivers optically, looks and feels very nice, and overall is a compact quality lens. I'm not surprised that Minolta sold so many of those back in the day, and that they are available for relatively little money today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please remember to like it and maybe even share it with your friends. And if you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe to our channel. Jules, Greg, and I really appreciate each and every subscriber coming our way. So thanks for watching. I hope to see you soon. Bye.